Americans were waiting on pins and needles to see if Alabama would elect a Republican or Democrat to the Senate on Tuesday. The special election was the most closely eyed since the earth-shaking presidential election that landed political outsider Donald Trump in the Oval Office. His election has led to some pretty non-traditional moves by the White House and has made liberals filled with anger. The Alabama special election was, in fact, due to President Trump's election as well. The election was to replace Trump cabinet member and 84th Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who left his Senate post to take that appointment. Republican candidate Roy Moore himself is a controversial figure because of both his career and the recent misconduct allegations that have been leveled against him. As you probably know by now, the race has been called for the Democratic candidate, Doug Jones. As of late yesterday, news outlets across the nation had dubbed him the winner, saying that the number of votes not yet counted couldn't make up the difference and give Jones a win. However, Moore is refusing to give up and concede, a move that many are calling just plain stubborn. What the media probably isn't telling you is that one hugely important group of people haven't even had their votes counted in this election. According to Breitbart News, the state of Alabama has decided to call this election without even counting the military votes. Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore refused to concede the Alabama Senate race on Tuesday, after his opponent Doug Jones declared victory. "God is always in control," Moore said during a short speech to supporters on election night. Moore's campaign has been run on a platform of religion from the start. Moore first rose to notoriety when he stood against the Ten Commandments being removed from a courthouse in Alabama. That garnered him nationwide attention, and he has been known for that stand ever since. During this run for office, however, Moore has been inundated with allegations of misconduct by a suspicious amount of women who seem to be just now remembering and recounting their interactions with Moore. Some have been proven to be out-and-out lies, and some are still being investigated, but regardless, the timing of these accusations was more than suspicions. This race was always going to be a close one, and any votes not being counted could cause a false win. Election tampering has been a huge topic this year, and yet Democrats seem more than happy to just check this box as a win for Jones, and not give it a second thought. The men and women in the military might have a little different opinion though. The question now is, are there enough military votes to swing the election in Moore's direction? The current law in Alabama requires a mandatory recount when there is a 0.5% margin, but Moore remains 1.5% behind his opponent, Doug Jones, who was declared the winner with 99% in. To give a little perspective on that, current estimates have Moore about 22,000 votes behind Jones. That is 1.5%, with a potential 1% of regular votes, not the military votes in question, not having been counted yet. That means that if the votes for Moore that haven't been counted, plus any military votes cast in his direction make up even 1% difference, the election results could be invalidated. If, as many suspects with elections like this, there was any misconduct on the part of Democrats to try and win this election the dirty way, and that gets out, Moore is almost assured the win, and if it goes to a second round. He was close as it was. All there would need to be is a whiff of impropriety on the part of his opponent or their party to try and throw the election, and Moore would have it safely in the bag. Moore cited Psalm chapter 40 verse 2 to give his supporters hope. "I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me, heard my cry, brought us up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet on the rock, and established my goings, and put a new in our mouth." Wait on God and let this process play out, Moore added. A Moore staffer urged supporters to wait, noting that the military votes have yet to be counted. Moore is about 22,000 votes short, but it is uncertain whether the uncounted votes tally up to that number. May God bless you as you go on, give you safe journey, and thank you for coming tonight, Moore concluded. It's not over, and it's going to take some time. The election is scheduled to be certified by the Alabama Secretary of State by Christmas, but a recount throws that result into question. No one knows what God's will is for this election, and as it turns out, we might not yet know what the will of the good people of Alabama is either. It's a sad day when we carry on with our election, ignoring those who can't be home to vote because they're out fighting for our freedom. We won't stand for it, and we shouldn't either. HT, Breitbart News. We have no tolerance for comments containing violence, racism, vulgarity, profanity, all caps, or discourteous behavior. Thank you for partnering with us to maintain a courteous and useful public environment where we can engage in reasonable discourse. It's easy to forget that we are a nation at war. Our nation is very good at forgetting things that aren't in front of us every day, and since the war we've been waging in the Middle East has been going on for some 15 years, and it's not in front of our faces every day, we like to pretend it's not happening. The media is very little help because if it can't be used as a political chip, they're probably not going to report on it, and at the moment, conflict with Muslims and their allies isn't very popular to the liberal cause. However, the war hasn't been fought in vain, since much has been accomplished during our time there. Terrorists have been wiped out, citizens have gotten at least some control of their countries back, and terrorists the world over discovered what happens to those who take American lives. Unfortunately, the conflict overseas has caused other civilized countries to take sides, and not all with us. The country of Syria is still very much in turmoil, in part thanks to Russian forces showing up to help with the civil war. Of course, they're siding with Syrian regime allies, as opposed to the Syrian Democratic Forces that the United States is partnering with in search of peace. According to the Air Force Times, just hours ago, those Russian forces were found crossing a no-fly zone, breaching an agreement that could bring us to an even bigger war. 2 U.S. F-22 Raptors intercepted and fired warning flares at 2 Russian Su-25s over the tightly congested airspace in Syria along the Euphrates River on Wednesday. The Russian fighters had crossed an agreed-upon deconfliction line that runs parallel with the Euphrates River. The U.S. and its Syrian partner forces, known as the Syrian Democratic Forces, operate on the eastern side of the Euphrates, and it's a region Russia and its Syrian regime allies are supposed to steer clear from. On December 13, 2 Russian Su-25s flew into coordinated coalition airspace on the east side of the Euphrates River near Abu Kamal, Syria, and were promptly intercepted by 2 F-22A Raptors, providing air cover for partner ground forces conducting operations to defeat ISIS, said Lieutenant Col. Damien Picard, a spokesman for U.S. Air Force's Central Command. The F-22s conducted maneuvers and fired warning flares and chaff to convince the pair of Russian fighters to leave the deconflicted airspace, he said. At one point, one Su-25 flew close enough to an F-22A that it had to aggressively maneuver to avoid a mid-air collision, Picard said. During the incident, a Russian Su-35 also flew across the river and was shadowed closely by one of the F-22 as the incident lasted nearly 40 minutes and the Russian aircraft eventually flew back to the west side of the river. First on CNN, 2 U.S. defense officials tell me that 2 U.S. F-22 jets intercepted 2 Russian Su-25 jets over Syria Wednesday, firing warning flares after the Su-25s crossed the agreed-upon deconfliction line, flying east of the Euphrates River multiple times. A Su-35 also present, Ryan Brown, at RA Brown 75, December 14, 2017. While it might seem like this was just some sort of unfortunate accident, that is highly unlikely. For one thing, the state-of-the-art technology that exists in the type of aircraft in question would without a doubt warn the pilot as to where they are, and if it had been an accident, it wouldn't have gone on for almost half an hour. Without so much as an excuse from Russia, it's difficult to view this as anything but a passive-aggressive act meant to taunt forces fighting for democracy in Syria. Here are more details from our source about Russia's inflammatory actions. The U.S. used a special hotline designed to deconflict ground and air operations with Russian forces to convey their concern over the incident, Pan said. A spokesperson for the Pentagon said. Despite the liberation of Raqqa in mid-October, operations along the Euphrates River and in Deir ez-Zor province continue as U.S.-backed fighters clear remnants of the Islamic State terror group from the region. That region is still hotly contested and is also controversial because of the many lucrative oil wells that dot the landscape. In late September, U.S.-backed Syrian fighters claimed Russian jets bombed one of their positions near a contested gas field, killing several of their forces. The battle for control of southern Syria and the middle Euphrates Valley has been contentious this year, and today's provocations by Russian fighters and their allies are not the first such incident. Since agreeing to this deconfliction arrangement, the Russians have flown into our airspace on the east side of the river 6 to 8 times per day, or approximately 10% of the Russian and Syrian flights, Picard said. During the summer, U.S. warplanes downed 2 Iranian Shahed 129 drones that threatened coalition and partner forces in Syria. And in June, a U.S. F/A-18 Super Hornet downed a Syrian Su-22 after it dropped bombs near U.S.-backed fighters in Syria. The coalition's greatest concern is that we could shoot down a Russian aircraft because its actions are seen as a threat to our air or ground forces, Picard explained. We are not here to fight the Russians and Syrians, our focus remains on defeating ISIS. That said, if anyone threatens coalition or friendly partner forces in the air or on the ground, we will defend them, he added. HT, Air Force Times, Obama is royally enraged. President Donald Trump is on a mission to make America great again and has been actively doing that daily since taking office 1 year ago. The overhaul of changes has not gone over well with his detractors, especially his predecessor, Barack Hussein Obama. Obama worked hard to destroy our country, especially in one particularly sick way that Trump could not ignore. He just made a massive change for the betterment of those who deserve it most, much to the discontent of Obama and the Democrat Party. It's only a matter of time now before the racist rioters take the streets and start destroying things to get what they feel they're deserved. Not on Trump's. The military was greatly diminished and disregarded under Obama, who repeatedly proved that he has zero respect for these brave men and women and the important sacrifice they make in protecting our nation. For 8 years, Obama did everything he could to diminish our military's capabilities and disrespect our soldiers. His disdain for them and disregard for their sacrifice evident in everything he did, from making them scrap for aircraft replacement parts in a junkyard to reducing them to his personal servants who hold his umbrella. All this was going on while he was giving hordes of American cash to our enemies, making them stronger while weakening our defense against them. We're now seeing what a difference a patriotic president makes. Among the most important Americans in this country to our president and first family, who have repeatedly proved it, are our military members and their families. Both Donald and Melania have made great effort to show their appreciation for these heroes, every chance they get. This latest move is probably Trump's biggest yet, and our service members and their families certainly deserve it a lot more than welfare gluttons do who Obama catered to. Conservative Tribune reports, while former President Obama dramatically downsized our military, President Donald Trump has delivered on his promise to dramatically change American soldiers' lives for the better. On Tuesday, Trump signed into law the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act, a $700 billion defense budget that will dramatically increase military spending and capabilities. The massive budget increase will give American soldiers the largest pay raise in more than 7 years. According to American Military News, the budget signed by Trump will give U.S. troops a 2.4% pay raise and create additional opportunities for employment in the military to ensure America continues to have the strongest military in the world. This legislation represents a momentous step toward rebuilding our military and securing the future for our children, Trump said Tuesday at the White House while signing the measure into law, according to the Washington Examiner. I applaud the work of the members of both parties who came together to pass the National Defense Authorization Act, which passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, something that's very nice to my ears. Trump's timing on this was no coincidence. He wanted to ensure the best for our military in the wake of another terrorist attack on our soil, knowing that they are crucial to protecting our nation from this threat that his predecessor brought here. That comes at no small cost or sacrifice, and he does not spare anything when it comes to protecting America and taking care of those whose job it is to do that. In the wake of the failed terrorist attack in New York on Monday, Trump stressed the importance of ensuring the U.S. is capable of protecting itself from operations such as the one carried out by a radical Islamic terrorist. Conservative Tribune continued, these attacks underscore the dangers we face from around the globe. The National Defense Authorization Act could not come at a more opportune or important time. Trump said, history teaches us that when you weaken your defenses, you invite aggression. The best way to prevent conflict of any kind is to be prepared. Only when the good are strong will peace prevail. This also comes at a time when we're on the brink of World War III, which will be brought on by North Korea's improved ballistic missiles that have the capability of reaching America. There are still a few of Obama's hurdles he has to cross before the funds can be freed up, which were probably put there by him on purpose. NDAA sets the budget but does not provide funding, which Congress must do. Trump urged Congress to pass legislation that will fund the defense budget. American Military News pointed out, now Congress must finish the job by eliminating the defense sequester and passing a clean appropriations bill. Trump said, according to the Washington Examiner, I think it's gonna happen. We need our military, it's gotta be perfecto. Trump has built our military back up to its former glory before Barack Obama stepped in to destroy it, just as he promised he would when he vowed to always support them. For the past 8 years, Barack Hussein Obama's disdain for our military was on display, as he constantly made it his mission to stab our heroes in the back while emboldening America's enemies. After successfully hollowing out our military to pre-World War II capabilities, leaving our soldiers to die at VA hospitals, and making it virtually impossible for our troops to defend themselves by rewriting our long-standing rules of engagement, Obama would frequently twist the knife in the backs of our servicemen even further, refusing to return salutes and making our Marines his personal umbrella-holding servant boys. Ever since Trump took office, things have been drastically different, as our new president tries to undo the damage that Obama caused to our military. In a clean sweep several months ago, Trump fired over 800 of Obama's crooked VA officials in order to ensure that our returning heroes have the best medical care possible. Additionally, President Trump has been acquiring new military technology to build up our forces, as he fulfills his campaign promise to revive America as the world's #1 superpower. Now, President Trump has taken a step even further, with the historic thing Trump just gave our military soldiers just in time for Christmas, that no doubt has Obama absolutely livid, as his crap-stained legacy continues to be flushed down the toilet every time he turns around. American Military News reports, President Donald Trump on Tuesday signed the National Defense Authorization Act, NDA, which will give the U.S. military its largest pay raise in 7 years, since 2010. The NDAA calls for a $700 billion Pentagon budget. It includes a 2.4% pay raise for troops, an increase in the number of troops, and increased spending for aircraft and ships as part of the fiscal year 2018 budget. The NDAA sets the budget but does not provide funding, which Congress must do. Trump urged Congress to pass legislation that will fund the defense budget. Now Congress must finish the job by eliminating the defense sequester and passing a clean appropriations bill. Trump said, "I think it's gonna happen. We need our military, it's gotta be perfecto." The budget calls for an additional 20,000 troops, funding for weapons systems, retention pay and bonuses, and repairs for Navy ships such as the USS John S. McCain and the USS Fitzgerald, which were both involved in deadly collisions earlier this year. This is the largest proposed military budget to date, particularly the most significant budget to be passed during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Congress still has to come up with a definitive plan to fund the $700 billion budget. It has to approve a defense budget cap increase, the Department of Defense Appropriations Act, in order to accommodate the proposed NDAA. The act has already been passed in the House. Republican Rep. Mac Thornberry, who chairs the House Armed Services Committee, said, having the president sign the NDAA conference report into law is a critical milestone in the effort to rebuild America's military strength, support our troops, and reform the way the Pentagon does business. The policies in this bill reflect months of bipartisan work and agreement. But Congress must follow this authorization with a matching appropriation bill if we are to really rebuild our military. There is more work to do. The bill includes 90 F-35 Joint Strike Fighters, which will further help build up the forces that Obama destroyed. It's so wonderful to finally have Commander-in-Chief who genuinely cares about our country, and is doing everything in his power to return America as the world's #1 superpower that Obama was so determined to destroy. Obama's biggest slap in the face to our veterans came after he promised to fix the VA, only to let things get drastically worse for our veterans. Throughout 8 years of Hussein Obama's regime, hundreds of thousands of veterans would go on to be forgotten, dying while waiting to be treated at VA hospitals across the nation. President Trump is not only fixing the VA that Obama failed to do, but is making Obama's corrupt VA officials pay the ultimate price for their negligence. In a clean sweep that happened in the overnight hours, it's being reported that 500 VA employees have just been terminated, and an additional 200 have been suspended for their shady conduct.